Good morning and welcome back. I hope you're not tired of me just yet. If you didn't tune into the last interview, I'm Ashley Furlong, a healthcare reporter at Politico, and we're now going to be discussing medical data and, of course, the European health data space. The proposal from the Commission makes some big promises: better access for all Europeans to their health data, easier cross-border care because of it, researchers being able to use the endless data sets to solve the bloc's biggest health problems, and policymakers being able to understand the big picture when they make decisions because they have access to that data. But that's the proposal, and there are big gaps between proposal and what will finally be implemented on the ground across the EU. Just a few housekeeping remarks. As you know, you can ask questions through the Swapcard platform, so please do. We don't get that many, and it's really nice to engage. You can also talk to us on Twitter using the hashtag, or on X, Politico Healthcare. I also want to note that Politico makes every effort to maintain diversity and balance on stage, and we had invited some women. Unfortunately, they were unable to attend, so you'll have to do with me. I'm going to introduce the speakers today. Next to me, we have Ray Pinto, Senior Director for Digital Transformation Policy at Digital Europe. We have Joni Kymäläinen, Senior Advisor at the Finnish Ministry of Health. And we have Jan Penfrat, Senior Policy Advisor at European Digital Rights, EDRI. Before we get going, Ray suggested when we had our briefing call this really interesting idea that I was like, I think I know the answer to that, but maybe I actually don't. If I can ask everyone very briefly, do we want an EHDS? Do we actually want this? Ray, you suggested it, so you can get going first.
Ashley, thank you very much. Yes, I think we get so lost in the negotiations of the EHDS, fine-tuning it, making it perfect, that we kind of forget the purpose of it. And I think yesterday was a very sobering day when you had the World Health Organization and other organizations trying to deal with immense amount of challenges, not only to the healthcare system, but to society. With pandemics, maybe pandemic X that may be coming, the preparedness we need to take, and the underpreparedness, what we're experiencing at the moment. And I think this is what the EHDS can fundamentally do. What people don't realize is the EHDS is trying to solve one inherent problem in our data protection legislation, right? The GDPR. And many people seem to think or say that there's not enough data protection or safeguards. The problem is the GDPR has a lot of it. But there's 2 articles within the GDPR that undermine that, and allows member states to create their own national rules, and a lot of fragmentation. And also the GDPR doesn't give a lot of clarity on synonymization, right? The EHDS does that. It takes away the fragmentation. It doesn't make sense if you are a developer in a small Nordic country, let's say Denmark, with a small population, and trying to do something, some development or software, with a largely homogeneous, biomarker base. Many developers go to the US, right, or outside the EU. In fact, when you look at research, over 85% of research and data sets in research databases are outside the EU. So the EHS is trying to bring all of that back.
Joni, do we need a EHDS, and do we want one?
We certainly do need EHDS. I was looking at my notes from back from 2019. Actually, there were quotes from Politico, and that was funny looking at the notes. Now, when we are negotiating the EHDS proposal, and we're very advanced in the negotiations in the Council Working Party and in the Parliament as well, Politico was saying, quoting me back then, that is funny, Finland plans to kickstart an EU health data revolution, and that's what we are actually doing now. We may have kickstarted it, but now we're doing it together. The datasets are like a pile of iron ore that can be forged into diamonds. So maybe that's so as well. We have high-quality datasets that can be utilized. The wider adoption of Finland's model could give Europe a huge competitive advantage. So, okay, we may have been the forerunners, but there are 27 other countries in the European community trying to do similar things, slightly different ways. So the value is do it in a unified way. Many of the things in the ESDS are the things we have done already in Finland, but to do it in the same way in each of the European countries, that's the real benefit of the ESDS, and not just do it in Europe. We feel that it should be an international way of doing things in the future. So we may have lost a competitive advantage in Europe, but we see, and quoting Politico and me again, Europe could become a best place to do research in privacy-compliant way. So, and it's not just about that. I was thinking about this, the benefits. Okay, we get better healthcare, better medicines, we get better services, we get better products. It will benefit the enterprises for sure as well. At the same time, we get better steering, we get better legislation. But what I was thinking, really, what is this all about? What's the most important thing in life? Okay, family and friends, and to live long and to be healthy. And when you're not healthy, then you want the solutions. You want the solutions quickly. And for example, I'm sure we're going to talk about opt-out or opt-in. If I had known, when I get ill, get a cancer or something, and have used my opt-out option, and then I would be saying, why did I use that opt-out option? If I had only known 15 years ago that I could have been helped, then so the benefit for this regulation and why we want the ESDS is the basic things in life, to live long and have healthy lives. Thank you.
We're going to get into that opt-out, opt-in just a bit. Jan, your thoughts on whether we need an EHDS, we want an EHDS?
If the EHDS is about digitizing healthcare systems, yes, I guess we do, because digitizing those old systems can make them more efficient. I'm from European Digital Rights. We've got digital in our name, literally. So yes, digitizing these systems can be a benefit. The question is, how do we do it? Do we do it with people's permission when we use the data? For what do we use that data? Do we comply with existing data protection rules? These questions are important. But then what we should also consider on top of that, and I think that sometimes gets forgotten in the debate, is digitizing the healthcare systems is an incredibly difficult challenge to meet. And if you read the EHDS, it sometimes sounds as if that was easy to be done. But if it had been easy to do, then all the members had done it already. I come from Germany. You may know that the German healthcare system is not top-notch in terms of digitization, to say the least. And even though the governments have tried over the years, but it is incredibly difficult to do. So it's a huge challenge, and the EHDS is not going to make this easier. It's just prescribing it top-down. So we need to be aware that this continues to need to take time. And then maybe a second thought. Digitizing healthcare systems does not replace investing in better healthcare, right? It's not a magic wand which you just wave and then with digitized all in a sudden your hospitals are going to be great, right? So we need on top of that actual investment in healthcare as a public service. So when I hear things like, oh, we need the EHDS to kind of be competitive or to make our businesses better or something, no, first of all, we need good healthcare as a public service. That's the task the government has as government, and I hope that the EHDS would help bring us there, but I'm not sure. But then again, it also depends on how do we make use of the digitized information that comes out of it, and who has the power to use that.
I think Joni would agree that it has been, in Finland's case, has been taken many years to get to where they are today, and that's a country like Finland. So just it's going to be a difficult process. I would like to talk a bit about what's happening at the council discussions and where the difficulties lie, Joni, where the major pain points, or what do we need to, what are countries battling to agree on that you are able to share today?
Okay, thank you for the good question. What's happening at the moment, I think each and every member state wants to get this regulation passed in the parliament as quickly as possible. But I think the main concerns at the moment that we're talking about, I'm sure the Parliament is doing similar conversations as well, is about one of the most difficult things is how to make this system sustainable, how to find the funding. So it's not just about the costs, and fees. It's especially, the primary use part, it needs funding as well, and the Commission is providing lots of funding tools to set up the services for the cross-border healthcare that are in the primary use part of the EHDS regulation. But secondary use part, it's not enough just to get funding to build up the services, and even that is a huge investment. But we feel that how to make this system sustainable, how to make the health data access bodies sustainable, because the Finnish experience has been that the fees have covered something like 78 or 80% of the expenses. 13% of the expenses have been covered by fees. So rest of it has to come from the state budget. So that's the health data access bodies. So you need lots of funding from Europe or from your state budget. A second thing that you need regarding funding, of course, is the funding for the health data users, those who are using the data sets. It's good that many researchers nowadays have their funding arranged, but there are many researchers or secondary use health data users who do not have the funding. So and the data sets cost money. So it's not just the expenses of the fees of the health data access bodies, it's the fees for the data sets as well, that you need a lot of money for that. And the third thing for financing is the health data holders, who have lots of obligations for setting the data sets available for secondary use purposes. Where would they get their funding from? Especially if you're talking about a basic situation of a health data holder who usually is a healthcare provider, whose purpose is to provide healthcare services, not to set up data sets for secondary use purposes. So how would we get funding for that? So that's a huge challenge of the EHDS. The second thing is transitional periods. My colleague here was mentioning how to implement this, and that's the challenge. Regarding primary use cases, in the current cooperation based on a directive, we have to have the use cases, which is e-prescription and a patient summary. And many countries have implemented these services, but not many people are actually using the services. So 98% of the people who are using these services are between Finland and Estonia, sending e-prescriptions from one country to another. So that's a working use case and business case. And it's starting to be a business case between Finland and Spain as well. Then is the task and responsibility of the data holders. There's going to be a lot of tasks. Definitions are one of the major things, especially what is a health data holder. Because in the negotiations, it seems to keep getting wider and wider and wider. So all of a sudden, there are many different legal entities that have these obligations to set the data sets available, and many other obligations. IP rights and trade secrets, we have talked about that many times. And I wouldn't be that worried about that. Regarding the regulation part, but from our experiences from FinData has been that it has been very difficult for them to evaluate whether there's a risk of IP rights or trade secrets in danger. Biggest thing regarding primary use is still the harmonization criteria for EHR systems and third-party certifications. If I understood it correctly, in the Parliament, they should be in favor of third-party certification. Then this question of opt-in, opt-out. Or in the Council Working Party, the consensus has been for a while now, okay, there have been parties who are pushing for opt-in, opt-out, but the consensus has been that we have the GDPR, and it's enough. The GDPR has been negotiated, and it should be enough for even EHDS. And one working example is Finland. We don't have opt-out or opt-in, we have the GDPR. Then the definition and scope of data categories. So what's the scope of secondary use? and many other things, and third countries, how we deal with third countries, whether we need reciprocity, I can't say the word, if we want the same terms for us and from them, so how do we deal with third countries?
I'm sure the UK is interested in that.
Yeah. So many things, and what is surprising as well, and today in the Working Party they will be talking about data flows in primary use. So we're still questioning how is this supposed to be working in primary use. I'm sure we have to centralize this regarding the secondary use, and that's a challenge in negotiation if you don't understand how it's supposed to work. So that's some things and many other.
I think that was very interesting. I saw lots of people taking notes frantically on all the big discussions. I want to talk about opt-in, opt-out, having none of that. Unfortunately, the rapporteur on the file, the co-rapporteur, was unable to join us. He really wanted to. But I understand in the Parliament that has been one of the key issues, but they seem to have sort of found an agreement there to go with an opt-out solution. And we're expecting in November that to be voted on in plenary. Jan, I wanted to hear your position on the opt-out. Can you explain, where the EDRI stands on this, and why you think that the current suggestions at the Parliament level, and as we heard at the Council level, are not going to work?
Okay, so we're talking about the secondary use of data, right? So hospitals, doctors forward patient records, medical records, to a centralized database of their member state that will store that information and then make it available in either anonymized form or pseudonymized form or not, depending on what the research request is, to entities that have requested access for research purposes. Now, these entities can be anyone. The EHDS says any legal or natural person can request access as long as you can claim a research interest. And it's in the sole discretion of the national body that holds the data at that point to grant or not grant access. Patients whose records we're talking about have no say over this. They will not even be informed. They will never know their data has been forwarded to the government agency or have been used. So this is what we're talking about. So if people say like, oh, we've already got GDPR, I see no GDPR protections being in this system at all. That is probably legally compliant with GDPR because of the fluffiness and loopholiness of Article 9 GDPR, but that's a different conversation. What I find astonishing in this conversation is that people seem to be more concerned within this system about the leakage of trade secrets than they are about the violation of people's privacy and the horrendous consequences that can have if medical records were to leak to the public or to another bad actor, basically stealing that information. And that really concerns me because, I mean, the debate should be primarily about data subjects, people, who the GDPR calls data subjects. And so the Parliament adding a right to opt out, for me and for ADRI, is the bare minimum that you'd have to do to gain people's trust in the system. So what people that represent patients' rights, I'm not saying patients' organizations that are, largely funded by the pharma industry, but I mean people who represent persons who have a particular interest in the protection of their medical records. So we're talking people who are interested in changing their gender, for example, people who are terminally ill, who have otherwise illnesses that are stigmatized in society. These people tell us, if I can't count on my doctor keeping that information to him or herself, then I'm just not going to go to the doctor anymore. Or I have to find a doctor that promises me that they won't forward that type of information. Or I go to a doctor who works with pen and paper, basically. Or I'm going to hide information vis-a-vis my doctor. And that is the worst information that we can be in, because the oath of secrecy between doctors and patients has been something that has been long established and for very, very good reasons. So the opt-out is kind of the very bare minimum for those people to allow them to opt out of the system and protect that very, very intimate information from leakage. Now, as ADRI, we have advocated for an opt-in solution because often people do not know that there is an opt-out option, or they can't use these rights for other reasons in that very moment. Let's not forget that when you go to the doctor, you have often other problems on your mind, right? You're ill, you may have had an accident, you're in hospital, so this is maybe not the greatest moment to think about opt-out or opt-in questions, which is why we have argued that this should, as a default, be an opt-in. So once you are in a good position to make these decisions, then you can choose to opt in. You can do this in the context of, in the presence of your doctor. You can have advice from your doctor about whether or not it would be a good thing for you to opt in, which I think is a really good setting to do that because you trust your doctor. He has your or she has your medical history, and so this kind of scenario where later on you suddenly think like I should have, it's not like your individual cancer data would have solved your individual life, right? This is a huge data set that we're going to create, and it's the mass of data that will make it useful. And whether we add an opt-out or whether we add an opt-in, none of those will prevent us from doing good medical research.
Some researchers might disagree with you on that, and Ray, I would like to bring you in here, as I've seen, quite a lot of concern from some research bodies and industry bodies on even an opt-out, saying that this is going to actually make the EHDS less useful. Your thoughts on that?
That's exactly it. There's a group of 35. Medical researchers and patient organizations. Let's not forget the patient organizations. And they came together because they were concerned that both Parliament and Council are shifting away for political reasons, right? It's not for scientific reasons, but for political reasons to either put in opt-in or opt-out measures. That would fundamentally undermine, one, the need for an EHDS, and two, the research that they're trying to commit. Like, let's put some facts and figures on the table. There's 8% of Europeans that are suffering from very difficult diseases, rare diseases. And this type of information can advance medical research to deal with that. If you have that disease or know a loved one, then you would most likely opt in. Right? But let's be honest. Let me ask every one of you here, and you're all in healthcare, who would opt in? Who would go through the process and fill out the forms and say, I want this, and do that? One person.
Oh, we got a few.
Oh,
okay.
No.
We got a few.
Okay. You got a few. We got about 40%. So these are the people who are doing this daily, who are probably doctors, who deal with patients. Great. What about the general population? Much smaller figure. So, this is what's at stake here. There will be a trade-off, right, fundamentally. If we want an EHDS that works, if we want an EHDS that can advance medical research, and this group put together a letter, about 32 of them, to stipulate that, and stipulate the conditions. If it goes to opt-out, what would that opt-out be?
Yoni first, and then Jan.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I totally agree with Ray, and we have been contacted as well, people with rare diseases and so on. It's compliant with the GDPR. We're using the safeguards of the GDPR, which is anonymization, pseudonymization. It's handling risks. There's always risks in primary use and secondary use. We can't avoid the risk. But another layer that we had in the Finnish legislation, ESDS, is the secure processing environment that will be audited environments. So you won't be able to see it's a data about Joni or Ray. So you won't be able to find out. There's the big goal, of course, is personalized medicine as well and personalized healthcare. So if you're using pseudonymized data, then it's in certain situations, and that's probably going to be in the national legislation as a possibility, to be able to contact Joni that we have found this finding and we could help you or we can't help you. So there's this possibility. What is opt-out? When we talk about opt-out, many people talk about very different things. What we have managed to do in Finland, we have the right to object, the right to restrict, our data being used for even for secondary use purposes, but it's based on the GDPR. There's some exemptions that we have negotiated in the GDPR, and we have done the balancing of our right to private life and our better good, which is, when we think about what has been happening, we had the pandemic. I don't want to raise things like this, but pandemics can happen. Cross-border health threats can happen, and the idea of having nationwide studies that would benefit all of us are the benefits of the ESDS regulation. If you're scared about the risk, yeah, we're managing the risks with the state-of-the-art tools that GDPR allows us, and we can have expert groups on anonymization, and that sort of technologies. But I would be more concerned about primary use, where those data sets that we have in our ESR systems are not anonymized, not generalized. That's just raw personal data, and many of the ESR systems are not audited by third-party auditioners. So that's one part of the negotiations that we're still going on. But I would be more worried about that. I wouldn't be that worried about secondary use, which this opt-out would probably mean these sort of data categories and for these sort of purposes would not be able to be used for the, if I decide. That would be the opt-out that we're talking about here. But we're handling risk with the state-of-the-art solutions. There are always going to be risks, but I would be more concerned about the risk regarding primary use of health data. Thank you.
Jan, please come in.
If previous government-run large digitization projects are anything to go by, I would put big question marks on those claims of state-of-the-art technology. A secure processing environment doesn't become secure just because the law calls them secure, right? This is not how IT security works, but I guess you all know this. I would be very interested to talk about all of you who have said they would not opt into data sharing, and I would love to know why. Because the question that everybody is afraid to ask in the political process is, if it is true that we can't have an opt-in or an opt-out because then everybody would opt out and we couldn't do research, why is that? Why do you think patients distrust our government systems, our healthcare systems so much that they would not only not opt in, out of laziness maybe, but they would also in masses opt out? Why is that? And I think this will bring us to the heart of the problem, why we need an opt-out and an opt-in. Now, when we talk about opt-out and opt-in systems, I think there is also a misconception about how difficult these need to be. And that's because the only time since GDPR that we have rolled out a large-scale opt-in or opt-out system, consent system in the world is accepting cookies, right, for online advertising. And that has been a terrible, terrible experience, not because opt-in and opt-out has to be terrible, but because the advertising industry made it deliberately so that we would say yes rather than no when we get those pop-ups, right? So this has been made deliberately terrible and cumbersome for us to say yes. This doesn't have to be that way. You can build a very smooth, very easy to use opt-in or opt-out system that explains people what they're doing. And then if you build something like that, I think the rates will be much different. I mean, 40%, that we had here in the room, that's a pretty good rate. And I would be surprised if you can't do any research with that. I mean, it's not like we don't have medication and medical research at the moment, don't we? And we don't have HDS at the moment. So it's not like this is a precondition to do anything at all. And without it, we're not going to have healthcare. Thank you.
Ray wants to come in, and then we're going to move away from opt-in, opt-out.
Yeah. I just want to address a couple of points that were said, right? And I actually want to use, Jan, if you don't mind, a comment you made yourself. No one is saying that digital is going to solve everything. It's not. It enables, it empowers. Let's be clear about that. No one has ever said that there's no medical research. Of course there is. But digital will make it better. Digital will get you there to the answers. It got us to the answers quicker when we had to create a vaccine for COVID. That's what it does. So how do you empower that? Well, you empower it with data. It's just that simple, right? And I don't think it's accurate to say that the GDPR has loopholes in it, and you can shift around, you can do whatever you want, and it's a free-for-all buffet. It's not, right? These are really stringent rules Yes, people break them, but you're breaking the law. Just like driving through the red light, right? People do it, but you're breaking the law. So it's very strict. And the EHS regulation, if you look at Article 35, it has very clear rules on what's prohibited. In Article 34, it has very clear rules of what is allowed. So, let's not compare it to advertising, right? Let's not say, the healthcare system is a bunch of, free-for-alls running around doing what they want. They don't. It's a heavily regulated industry. Digital will help them. And the rules are clear, and they're even going to be tight in the HDS. So let's avoid the disinformation, please.
Last point on this.
Just a quick, because this is really hilarious. Because most of the biggest GDPR rule breakers that have ever existed and continue to bend those very strict rules are companies that Digital Europe is representing. So I find this really surprising.
But they're not surgeons. We don't represent surgeons.
Yeah, but they would be companies that are allowed to access secondary use data.
So surgeons also will break the rules then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, we're talking about those companies, the tech companies that you represent.
Yeah, but the digital is for the surgeons. It's for the medical practitioners. This is
no, there is no limitation in the EHDS that limits the use of secondary data
for medical research.
Who does that? Google does a wellness app. Apple does a wellness app.
Well, why do we have regulations then in the first place if everybody breaks the rules? So,
well, I think what we're kind of discussing now is the sort of the practicalities of it, but for many countries, even implementing this is going to be very, very, very difficult. Joni, we've got quite tight deadlines in the proposal to implement it. Even if we stretch those a bit, and even if they're a bit longer, can all EU 27 countries implement this proposal? Is that something, not in the next 20 years, but in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? Is that something that's actually practical? Finland's obviously an exception. It's not the sort of the norm. Is this something that everyone can implement?
When I first saw the regulation, I thought, no, it's not possible. That would be my answer then. But it's possible. Of course, we're in a different position in Nordic countries because we had some of the things we have been doing, like Ray mentioned, I have mentioned to him that for 50 years, we have had high quality registers, some of them from the 1950s onwards. And then you need the national ID to link the data. And then you need to have, good information systems like Kanta services, combining all the EHRs. So you need to have basic things done before you can implement this sort of things. But we feel it's possible. We can learn from each other in the joint action supporting the EHDS, TEHDAS 1 and TEHDAS 2, which is run by Sitra, the Finnish think tank organization. We're already in the implementing phase of trying to how to implement this. Within the timelines that are in the regulation proposal, no, it can't be done. That's my honest answer. Primary use cases, I would say, some of the use cases we have already started doing them, like I mentioned. I would say 1 to 5 years, and maybe the new use cases will take more than 5 years. So regarding the secondary use, basic things that you need to build are health data descriptions, the dataset descriptions. So what sort of datasets are available, then have the catalog, have the European catalog, which is probably going to be a portal, in order to find the datasets, have a utility and quality label to determine if they're any good or useful for your use for your secondary use purposes, and then have the SP security processing environments. From my experience from Finland regarding the security processing environments, even though we had some systems in place when they had the regulation, it took 3 years to have first audited environment. Now we have 9. So I would say the basic things in order to be able to access the data sets and have an environment would take 5 years. And I would say from 5 to 10 years it would be possible throughout Europe, but that would mean a lot of cooperation with member states, because some are in the beginning stages who have not digitalized their systems, like for example Germany. Unfortunately, I mentioned Germany, but but you're working at it. Well, but I would say that yes, we can implement it, but not in the timelines that are in a proposal. I would say 5 to 10 years. It's more likely that it will happen. At least the sort of forerunners like Finland and I would say probably Estonia and I don't want to name countries. That's what I was just thinking. The forerunners would have it much easier because we have already done some of the things But for some countries who are not that digitalized, it will be a bit challenge.
Ray wants to come in here.
Yeah, just very quickly, and I think if Thomas Sokol was here, he would say that, looking at this list that you kindly gave us, that will we do it on time? Will we be able to get an agreement in both Council, Parliament, finish trilogues before March? Because if we don't, then it gets pushed out to the next Commission. And what does that next Commission look like? Where on the priority list would a potentially right-wing dominated Parliament or Council look like? So there's a lot of things at risk here where the negotiations could go on, like the e-privacy regulation, right? Or heaven forfend, the patent discussion. It's now been 30 years. So, how do we get this done? So considering all these long lead times to implement this, and I think that's quite concerning.
Jan, should we be pushing to get this done before the election, or should we be saying, let's just take a step back, like we might not actually reach that target, we need to get it right rather than done?
No, absolutely. I don't think there's not any particular reason to push it. Sure, it would be nice to have it. But again, if it's going to take 10 years to implement anyways, or even longer in some member states, then whether we finish it now or next year, it doesn't make, such a huge difference anymore. And I would rather have this to be a very high quality law that gives member states the time to implement this in a secure manner, because building secure IT infrastructure is incredibly difficult at scale, and governments need to hire the man and woman power to do that, and that will take time, that will take resources. We need to throw a lot of resources at that. Member states would ideally build transparent development processes where these infrastructures are built as open source software that can be vetted by the public, so it doesn't become a proprietary blob of, they're doing something with IT there, but we don't know what. And they need to hire staff that has the skills to operate these systems. And this needs time, so I don't think it helps anybody if you rush this through, as much as industry might like that, understand it. And it would be nice, again, to have it. Digitalization, again, can be very useful in healthcare systems. But if you rush it through and have bad quality, then the likelihood of data leaks are going to increase. And I don't think that's in patients' interests.
And politically, we've seen the Parliament really pushing for this to be agreed, because obviously it would be a big political win for many of the MEPs. Joni, the Council doesn't need to, they can ignore that and say, we're going to take our time. But do you think that this is going to be done before the election?
There's a political will to get it passed now, and each and every member state are of the opinion that we need to push it now and get it passed. I don't need to push it. Just to agree on things. And the implementing phase will take for years, but we need to start with it as quickly as possible. So we want this, and we want this happening as quickly as possible, so we can build the services up. And we are going to have the challenges, but we can learn from each other and make this happen.
Thank you, all three. I really appreciate the time today. It was a very engaging and lively discussion, and it's a really important issue and a crucial piece of legislation that has, I think, great promises, everyone agrees, but also many, many risks and many things that still need to be worked out, and very tight deadlines if we're going to be done by the elections. Please remain seated for a sponsored segment from Emergent. I want to welcome on stage Christopher Fretch, Senior Vice President of Global Government Affairs at Emergent, and Robert Madeline, Senior Strategist at FIPRA International. Thank you very much.